The scream that tore through Ardmore's dusty Main Street on that scorching July afternoon in 1883 was not one of fear, but of rage, and it belonged to at least 24 voices, all howling for the blood of the woman running barefoot through the Oklahoma heat. Felicity Owens had never imagined her life would come to this, fleeing with nothing but the clothes on her back and terror beating in her chest like a war drum. But 3 days ago, she had made the mistake of healing the sheriff's daughter when the doctor had given up hope, and somehow that single act of compassion had transformed her from the quiet seamstress who kept to herself into a witch who needed burning. She had lived in Ardmore for nearly 2 years, keeping her gifts hidden, helping only in the smallest ways that might pass for coincidence or luck. But when she had seen that little girl gasping for breath, fever turning her lips blue, something inside Felicity had broken. She had placed her hands on the child's chest and let the warmth flow through her palms, pulling the sickness out like drawing poison from a wound, and the girl had opened her eyes and smiled. The mother had wept with joy. The father had called for the rope. Now Felicity ran with her lungs burning, her dark hair streaming behind her like a banner, her green eyes wild with the kind of terror that comes from knowing your own neighbors want you dead. The dust kicked up around her feet as she left the town limits, the angry shouts growing neither closer nor farther, a constant pressure at her back. She had no horse, no water, no plan beyond putting one foot in front of the other until her body gave out or she found somewhere, anywhere to hide. The land beyond Ardmore stretched flat and unforgiving under the summer sun, broken only by occasional clusters of scrub brush and the distant promise of hills. Felicity's throat felt like sandpaper, her dress clung to her with sweat, and still she ran. Behind her, the mob had mounted up now. She could hear the thunder of hooves, and her heart sank because she knew she could not outrun horses. This was how it would end then. Dust and blood and a scared girl who had only wanted to help. She crested a small rise and her foot caught on a root, sending her sprawling forward. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs and scraped her palms raw. For a moment she simply lay there, tasting dirt and defeat, listening to those hoofbeats growing louder. Then strong hands gripped her shoulders and hauled her upright, and she found herself staring into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man who held her was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and hair the color of wheat stubble. He wore a dusty brown hat, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and an expression of calm determination that seemed entirely at odds with the chaos bearing down on them. He did not ask questions. He simply looked at her, then at the mob cresting the hill behind her, and made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. "Come with me," he said, his voice a low drawl that somehow cut through her panic. "Now." He did not wait for her agreement, just grabbed her hand and pulled her after him, running perpendicular to the mob's path. Felicity stumbled along behind him, too shocked and exhausted to do anything but follow. They ran for what felt like miles but was probably only minutes, weaving between brush and over small gullies, until they reached a line of cottonwood trees that marked a creek bed. Beyond that stood a modest ranch house, a barn and several corrals holding horses. The man pulled her into the barn without breaking stride, then turned and put a finger to his lips. Felicity nodded, pressing herself against the rough wood of a stall while trying to quiet her ragged breathing. He moved to the barn door and stood there, relaxed as Sunday morning, just as the mob came thundering into his yard. "Help you gentlemen," the man called out, his tone friendly but not particularly welcoming. Felicity recognized the voice of Thomas Prout, the blacksmith, answering. "We are looking for a woman, Ashton, a witch. She came this way." So her rescuer's name was Ashton, Felicity pressed harder against the wall as if she could somehow disappear into the wood itself. "A witch," Ashton repeated, and she could hear the skepticism in his voice even from her hiding place. "In Ardmore, Oklahoma in the year of our Lord 1883, you all been drinking. This is not a joke, Dalton." That was Sheriff Prude himself, Thomas's older brother. "The woman used dark magic on my daughter. She could have done anything, put any kind of curse or mark on the girl. We will not have such evil in our town. Your daughter, who was dying yesterday and is apparently well enough today for you to be out here instead of by her bedside," Ashton Dalton replied, his voice still calm but with an edge now. "Seems to me if she did something, it was help the child. That is not for you to decide." The sheriff shouted, "Have you seen her or not?" There was a pause, and Felicity held her breath. This man owed her nothing. He did not know her. He had no reason to lie to a sheriff and 24 armed men. She closed her eyes and waited for the inevitable. "Have not seen any woman," Ashton said clearly. "Witch or otherwise, just been working my horses all day. Now, if you all do not mind, some of us have work to do instead of chasing shadows in the heat." "We are going to search your property," the sheriff declared. "No, you are not." The temperature of Ashton's voice dropped 20 degrees. "This is my land, legally purchased and paid for. You have no warrant and no cause. You want to search my property, you come back with a judge's signature. Until then, I would appreciate it if you and your mob got off my ranch." The silence stretched so long that Felicity thought surely they would rush the barn, would find her and drag her out, and probably hang Ashton alongside her for harboring a witch. But finally she heard the sheriff speak again, his words tight with anger. "This is not finished, Dalton." "I imagine not," Ashton agreed. "But it is finished for today. Good afternoon, gentlemen." The sound of horses departing was the sweetest music Felicity had ever heard. Still she did not move, not until Ashton appeared in front of her stall and offered his hand again. "They are gone," he said quietly. "You can come out." Felicity stared at his hand for a long moment, this offering from a stranger who had just lied to the law for her, then slowly reached out and took it. His palm was calloused and warm, and when he pulled her to her feet this time it was gentle. In the better light of the barn's interior, she could see him more clearly. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble, and those remarkable blue eyes that looked at her with curiosity but not fear. There was dust on his clothes and hay in his hair, and something about him radiated a kind of solid dependability that made Felicity want to weep with relief. "Thank you," she managed, her voice hoarse from running and screaming and terror. "You did not have to do that." "Sure I did," Ashton said simply. He released her hand and stepped back, giving her space. "Cannot just stand by while a mob runs down a scared woman. What is your name?" "Felicity Owens." "Pleased to meet you, Miss Owens. I am Ashton Dalton. This is my ranch." He tilted his head, studying her. "Are you really a witch?" The question was asked with such straightforward curiosity that Felicity did not know whether to laugh or cry. She settled for honesty. "I can do things. Healing things, mostly. I do not know if that makes me a witch or just different." Ashton considered this, then shrugged. "My grandmother could predict storms with her bad knee and always knew when someone was lying to her. My mother could gentle the wildest horse with just her voice. Seems to me the world is full of unexplainable things, and most of them are not evil." He gestured toward the barn door. "You look about ready to fall over. Come up to the house. I will get you water and food." "They will come back," Felicity said urgently. "The sheriff, I mean. When he has time to think about it, he will realize you must have helped me. He will come back with that warrant." "Probably," Ashton agreed, "but that will take a few days at least. Judge Crawford is over in Gainesville right now, and by the time the sheriff rides out there and back, well." He smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. "Lots can happen in a few days. Come on, Miss Owens, you are safe here. Magic or not, you are welcome here." He did not say the words exactly, but they hung in the air between them nonetheless, a promise and a protection. Felicity felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen, just a fraction. She followed him out of the barn and across the yard to the ranch house. It was a simple structure, neat and well-maintained, with a covered porch and windows that actually had glass in them, which meant Ashton was doing better than many ranchers. He held the door open for her, and she stepped into a main room that served as both kitchen and living area, with two other doors leading to what she assumed were a bedroom and maybe a storeroom. The interior was clean but clearly the home of a bachelor, with boots by the door, a gun rack on the wall, and a table covered with what looked like ledgers and correspondence. Ashton pulled out a chair for her, and she sank into it gratefully, her legs finally giving up their fight to hold her upright. He brought her water first, and she drank it so fast she made herself cough. The second glass she sipped more slowly, feeling it soothe her raw throat. Then he set out bread and cheese and cold beef, and she ate with the single-minded focus of someone who had not realized how hungry fear had made her. Ashton sat across from her, waiting patiently until she had taken the edge off her hunger. When she finally slowed down, he spoke again. "Tell me what happened. If you want to, I mean." So Felicity told him. About living quietly in Ardmore for 2 years, working as a seamstress, bothering no one. About the sheriff's daughter burning up with fever, about the doctor shaking his head gravely and saying there was nothing more to be done. About sneaking into the house late at night, because she could not bear to let a child die when she had the power to prevent it. About the girl's miraculous recovery and the questions that followed, and how by morning the whispers had started, and by afternoon the whispers had become shouts, and by evening the mob had formed. "I should have known better," she said quietly, staring at her hands on the table. "I should have just let nature take its course." But she was only 7 years old, and she had her whole life ahead of her, and I thought maybe just this once I could help without anyone knowing it was me. "You did the right thing," Ashton said firmly. "Saving a child is always the right thing. The sheriff is the one who should be ashamed, trying to kill the woman who saved his daughter's life." "He is scared," Felicity said, surprising herself by defending the man who had wanted her dead. "People fear what they do not understand, and what I can do, it is not normal, it is not natural." "Says who?" Ashton leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Seems to me it is plenty natural if you were born able to do it. Just because most folks cannot do something does not make it wrong or evil. Most folks cannot break a horse the way I cannot read the land the way I can. Does that make me unnatural? That is different." "Is it?" He held her gaze, and Felicity found she could not look away. "I think people just do not like being reminded that the world is bigger and stranger than they want to believe. Easier to call you a witch than to admit that maybe God gives different gifts to different people, and yours just happens to be more obvious than most." No one had ever spoken to her like this before, with such casual acceptance of the thing that had defined and limited her entire life. Felicity felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She had done enough crying while running for her life. She would not cry now, not in front of this kind stranger who had already done so much for her. "Why are you helping me?" she asked instead. "You do not know me. And you have put yourself at risk by lying to the sheriff." Ashton was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider the question seriously. "My father died when I was 15, he said finally, "thrown from a horse and broke his neck. My mother tried to hold this place together, but it was too much for her. When I was 17, a man came through these parts, a drifter. He had no reason to stop and help us, but he stayed for 3 months, helped me learn what I needed to know to run this ranch properly. Taught me about horses and cattle and how to manage money. When he left, he would not take any payment, just said someday I should help someone else who needed it. He met her eyes again, and she saw nothing but sincerity in his face. I have been waiting 8 years to pay that debt forward, Miss Owens. Seems to me you need help and I have help to give. Simple as that. It was not simple at all, of course. It was dangerous and foolish and could cost him everything. But Felicity was too tired and too grateful to argue. Instead, she just nodded and said, "Thank you, Mr. Dalton. I will not forget this." "Call me Ashton," he said. "And you can stay here as long as you need to. We will figure something out." That night, Felicity slept in Ashton's bed while he took blankets and slept in the main room, insisting over her protests that he had spent plenty of nights sleeping on harder surfaces. She lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, and tried to plan what came next. She could not stay here. It was too dangerous for Ashton. But she also could not go back to Ardmore, and any other town might have the same reaction if her gifts became known. Maybe she would have to go further west, to one of the territories where law was scarcer and questions were fewer. Maybe she would have to give up healing entirely, lock that part of herself away forever. The thought made her ache, but not as much as the memory of that mob screaming for her blood. Sleep came eventually, restless and full of dreams where she ran endlessly through dust while voices called her monster, called her evil, called her witch. She woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Morning light streamed through the window, and for a disoriented moment Felicity could not remember where she was. Then memory returned in a rush, and she sat up quickly, smoothing her hair and her wrinkled dress. She had slept in her clothes, having nothing else to wear. When she emerged into the main room, Ashton was at the stove, cooking breakfast with the comfortable efficiency of a man used to caring for himself. He glanced over his shoulder and smiled. "Morning. Hope you like your eggs scrambled because that is the only way I know how to make them." "Scrambled is perfect," Felicity said. She felt awkward and uncertain, aware that she was an imposition, a danger, a complication in this man's orderly life. "Ashton, I have been thinking. I should leave today. Go west maybe, or north, somewhere far from here. The longer I stay, the more danger I bring to your door." Ashton turned from the stove, spatula in hand, and fixed her with a look that was equal parts exasperation and amusement. "Miss Owens, with all due respect, that is the worst plan I have ever heard. You would be alone, on foot, with no supplies and no money, heading into country you do not know. You would last maybe 2 days before you died of exposure or thirst, or got yourself killed some other way. Better that than bringing a mob down on you." "No mob is coming today," Ashton said firmly. "And probably not tomorrow either. Like I said, the sheriff has to get a warrant, and that takes time. So here is what we are actually going to do. You are going to stay here out of sight while I go into town and get a sense of the situation. I will see how hot tempers are running, whether anyone is still actively looking for you, what the sheriff's plans are. Then we will make a real plan, based on actual information instead of fear." He turned back to the stove and started sliding eggs onto plates. "Besides, you need rest and food and time to recover. Cannot make good decisions when you are exhausted and terrified." Felicity wanted to argue, but the truth was she had no better ideas, and the thought of heading out into the Oklahoma summer with nothing was indeed terrifying. So she nodded slowly and said, "All right, but please be careful if they suspect you helped me." "They can suspect all they want," Ashton said. He set a plate in front of her, loaded with eggs and bacon and toasted bread. Suspecting and proving are different things. Now eat. You are going to need your strength." They ate in companionable silence, and Felicity found herself sneaking glances at him between bites. In the morning light he looked younger, less stern, with his hair still mussed from sleep, and his blue eyes warm with the kind of easy contentment that came from being comfortable in your own home. He was handsome, she realized, in a rough-hewn, practical way that suited the life he led. She had not thought about men much in the past few years, too focused on hiding her gifts and surviving day to day. But there was something about Ashton Dalton that drew her attention, something beyond gratitude for his help. The calm way he moved, the quiet confidence in his voice, the fact that he had looked at her yesterday and seen a person who needed help instead of a monster who deserved to burn. After breakfast, Ashton headed into town, riding a pretty bay mare and telling Felicity to stay inside with the doors locked. She watched him go from the window, then turned to survey the house. It was clear the place needed a woman's touch, or at least a thorough cleaning. Without quite meaning to, she found herself tidying up, washing the dishes, sweeping the floors. It felt good to do something useful, to repay in some small way the enormous debt she owed him. She was scrubbing the table when she felt it, a sharp spike of pain that made her gasp and press a hand to her chest. Not her pain, someone else's. Somewhere on this ranch, something was hurting. Felicity tried to ignore it, remembering how helping had gotten her into this mess in the first place. But the pain pulsed again, insistent, and she could feel the fear wound through it. An animal, she thought. Something hurt and scared against her better judgment. She unlocked the door and stepped outside. The pain pulled her toward the barn, and when she slipped inside, she found its source immediately. In one of the stalls lay a horse, a young chestnut with a white blaze on its face, and something was clearly very wrong. The animal's sides heaved, its eyes rolled white with panic, and even from several feet away Felicity could sense the wrongness inside it. Something twisted and blocked. Colic, she realized. The horse was colicking and badly. Without treatment it would die, probably within hours. She should wait for Ashton to return. This was his horse, his property, his decision. But the animal's pain beat against her senses like a drum, and Felicity had never been able to ignore suffering when she had the power to stop it. That was the thing about her gift. It was not just an ability. It was a compulsion, a need that lived in her bones. Slowly, talking softly, she approached the horse. It tried to lurch away from her, but it was too weak to do more than lift its head. Felicity placed her hands on its neck, feeling the fever heat of its skin, and reached down deep inside herself for that warm, golden light that was her gift. It flooded through her palms and into the horse, and she felt its anatomy spread out in her mind like a map. There, the blockage in its gut, the twisted mass of pain. She visualized it unwinding, relaxing, releasing, and poured her energy into making it so. The horse groaned, then suddenly relaxed, its breathing evening out. Felicity kept her hands on it for another few minutes, making sure everything was flowing properly again, then stepped back. The chestnut lifted its head and looked at her with clear, calm eyes. The pain was gone. It would be sore for a day or two, but it would live. Felicity stumbled out of the stall, exhausted. Healing always took something out of her, especially big healings like that. She made her way back to the house and collapsed on the sofa, asleep almost before her head hit the cushion. That was where Ashton found her when he returned late that afternoon. He stood in the doorway of his own house, staring at the sleeping woman on his furniture, at the clean floors and washed dishes, at this person who had somehow begun making herself at home in his life with remarkable speed. He should wake her and tell her what he had learned in town. The mob had dispersed, but the anger had not. The sheriff was indeed planning to get a warrant, and several of the more religious townsfolk were talking about organizing a proper witch hunt. It was not safe for Felicity to stay in the area, and they needed to make plans. But she looked so peaceful in sleep, her dark hair spread across the cushion, her face finally relaxed from the fear and tension that had marked it yesterday. Let her rest a while longer, Ashton decided. The bad news could wait until she had gotten at least a few hours of good sleep. He went out to check on the animals, and that was when he found the chestnut standing calmly in its stall, eating hay. Ashton stopped dead, staring. He had checked that horse this morning before leaving, had seen it in the early stages of colic, and had been planning to stay with it tonight, hoping it would pass the blockage on its own. If it had not, he would have lost a 2-year-old that he had been training for months. Now it stood perfectly healthy, as if nothing had ever been wrong. Ashton turned and looked back at the house, understanding dawning. She had healed his horse. Despite being in danger, despite having every reason to hide and do nothing that might reveal her presence, Felicity Owens had saved his animal because it was suffering and she could help. Something warm unfurled in his chest, a feeling he could not quite name. He finished his chores slowly, thinking hard about this woman who had stumbled into his life and turned everything sideways. When he returned to the house, the light was fading toward dusk and Felicity was stirring on the sofa, blinking awake with the confused expression of someone who had not meant to sleep so long. "Evening," Ashton said quietly. "Feel better?" Felicity sat up, pushing her hair back. "I am sorry. I did not mean to sleep all afternoon. You needed it." He pulled out a chair and sat down, studying her. "Thank you for healing my horse." She froze, her eyes going wide. "I am sorry. I know I should have asked, should have waited, but it was in so much pain and I could feel it suffering and I just—" "Thank you," Ashton repeated more firmly. "That chestnut is one of my best young horses. Would have been a real blow to lose it. Whatever you did, it is completely healthy now. So thank you." Felicity relaxed slightly, though she still looked wary. "You are not angry." "Why would I be angry that you saved my horse?" Ashton shook his head. "Miss Owens, I think you have spent so long hiding what you can do that you have forgotten that healing is a gift, not a curse. Most people would be grateful for what you did. Most people want to hang me for it. Most people are fools." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I went into town today, got some information. The sheriff is still planning to come after you, but it will be a few days like I thought. That gives us time to figure out what to do." "I need to leave," Felicity said immediately. "Tonight, if possible, I will not put you in more danger." "And go where?" Ashton challenged. "With what supplies, what money, what protection? Miss Owens, Felicity, please just listen for a minute." He waited until she nodded, then continued. "I have a proposal for you. Stay here on my ranch as my employee. I will tell anyone who asks that you are my housekeeper. No one in town knows what you look like well enough to identify you if you keep your head down. And even if they did suspect, well, a man is allowed to hire who he wants on his own property." "That is a terrible plan," Felicity said flatly. "The sheriff will see right through it." "Maybe, maybe not, but it buys us time. Time for the anger in town to cool down. Time for people to forget and move on to the next excitement. Time for you to rest and recover and actually make a real plan instead of just running blind." He held her gaze, willing her to understand. "I am not asking you to stay forever. Just stay long enough to be safe. Please." Felicity looked at him. This man who barely knew her but had already risked so much on her behalf, and felt something crack open inside her. She had been alone for so long, keeping everyone at a distance to protect both them and herself. The idea of staying, even temporarily, of having somewhere to belong, was almost painfully appealing. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, needing to understand. Ashton was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke his voice was soft. Because you remind me that there is still good in this world worth protecting. Because you saved a little girl and my horse when you could have just walked away. Because everyone deserves a place where they are safe. He smiled slightly. And because my house has never been this clean, and I would be a fool to let you go before you teach me your ways. That startled a laugh out of her, and Felicity felt some of the tension drain away. All right, she said quietly. I will stay. For now. But if it becomes too dangerous if the sheriff comes with that warrant, then we will deal with it, Ashton said firmly. Together. But until then, welcome to the Dalton Ranch, Miss Owens. You have a job if you want it. So Felicity stayed. The days fell into a rhythm that was at once strange and comfortable. She kept the house, cooked the meals, mended Ashton's clothes and her own. He worked the ranch, training horses and checking fences and doing the 1,000 tasks that kept a place like this running. In the evenings, they would eat dinner together and talk, really talk, in a way Felicity had not talked to anyone in years. She learned that Ashton had inherited this land from his father and had spent the past 8 years building it into something profitable. That he loved horses more than cattle, but kept a small herd because it was practical. That he had been engaged once, years ago, but the girl had decided ranch life was too hard and had married a store clerk in Dallas instead. He learned that Felicity had been born in Missouri, that her gift had manifested when she was 12, and she had healed a bird with a broken wing. That her parents had been frightened of her but not cruel, just distant, and she had left home at 18 to spare them the difficulty of having a daughter people whispered about. That she had been moving from town to town ever since, never staying long, always keeping her head down until Ardmore, where she had let herself believe she might be able to settle for a while. They did not touch on the subject of what would happen next, not directly. It hung between them like a question neither was ready to answer. 3 days after Felicity arrived, a rider came to the ranch. She saw him from the window and her heart seized with panic until she realized it was not the sheriff. Just a cowboy from a neighboring ranch, asking Ashton if he had any horses ready for sale. Business, nothing more, but it reminded her that she could not hide forever. Sooner or later someone would see her, recognize her, report back to town. She needed a better disguise. That evening she asked Ashton if he could get her different clothes, maybe some things from the general store. He rode into town the next day and returned with a bundle that made her smile despite everything. Practical dresses in brown and gray, a sunbonnet that would shadow her face, work gloves to protect her hands, and tucked at the bottom, a hairbrush and ribbons and a bar of soap that smelled like lavender. "Thought you might like something nice," he said, looking almost embarrassed. "Everything else is just practical stuff, but the soap, well, my mother always said even on a ranch a woman should have something that makes her feel pretty." Felicity held the soap to her nose and breathed in the scent, feeling tears prick her eyes. Such a small thing, such a simple kindness, but it meant more than she could say. "Thank you, Ashton, for all of this," he shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. Just supplies, not a big deal, but it was a big deal to her. Everything he did was a big deal. From the way he made sure she ate enough to the way he told her stories over dinner to make her laugh, to the way he treated her like a person instead of something to be feared. Without quite meaning to, without quite noticing when it happened, Felicity found herself falling in love with him. It was there in the way her heart lifted when she heard his footsteps on the porch. In the way she caught herself watching him work in the corral, admiring the easy confidence of his movements. In the way she started cooking his favorite meals just to see him smile. in the way she lay awake at night in his bed, knowing he was sleeping just beyond the door and wished things were different, simpler, possible. She told herself it was foolish. She was here temporarily, a guest fleeing danger. He was being kind, nothing more. There was no future in this, no point in letting herself feel things that could only lead to heartache. But the heart, Felicity was learning, did not much care for logic. 2 weeks after her arrival, she was in the kitchen making bread when Ashton came in holding his left hand wrapped in a bandana, blood seeping through the cloth. Felicity dropped the dough and rushed to him. "What happened?" "Caught it on a piece of broken fence," Ashton said, wincing. "It is not too bad, just bleeding a lot." Felicity unwrapped the bandana and saw a deep gash across his palm, the kind that would need stitches and would take weeks to heal properly. The kind that would make it hard for him to work, to hold reins, to do all the things a rancher needed to do with his hands. She looked up and met his eyes and saw him watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "I can stitch it," she said slowly. Or you can heal it," Ashton finished quietly. "I know, I have been wondering if you would offer." "I did not want to presume," Felicity said. "Not everyone wants to be touched by magic, even healing magic." Ashton flexed his injured hand and winced again. "I trust you," he said simply. "If you are willing, I would be grateful." Felicity led him to the table and sat him down, then fetched a bowl of clean water. She washed the blood away gently, studying the wound. Deep but clean, no dirt or debris inside. She could fix this easily. She placed her hands over his palm, letting her fingers curl around his hand, and reached for her gift. It came more easily than usual, perhaps because she was relaxed, perhaps because it was him. The warm, golden light flowed from her into him, and she felt his skin begin to knit back together, the torn flesh mending as if time were running backward. It took only a minute. When she lifted her hands away, Ashton's palm was whole and unmarked except for a faint pink line that would fade by morning. He flexed his hand, testing it, and his eyes widened. "That is remarkable," he breathed. "It does not even hurt anymore." "Good," Felicity said, but she did not move away. She was still holding his hand, she realized, and he was still letting her. Their fingers were intertwined, his rough and calloused, hers smaller and softer, and the fit felt right in a way that made her chest tight. Ashton looked up at her, and the expression in his blue eyes made her breath catch. There was wonder there, yes, but also something warmer, something that looked almost like longing. "Felicity," he said, his voice rough. "I need to tell you something." Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Yes, you can stay here, not just until the trouble dies down, for as long as you want. Forever, if you are willing." He tightened his grip on her hand. "I know this is probably not what you want to hear, and I know you have every reason to move on and make a new life somewhere else. But I am saying it anyway because I think you should know that you have a place here if you want it. With me, if you want." He was not good with words, Felicity realized. He was stumbling over them, his face flushed, clearly terrified she would reject him. It was possibly the sweetest thing she had ever witnessed. "Are you asking me to stay as your housekeeper?" She asked quietly, needing him to be clear, needing to hear him say it. "No," Ashton said, his eyes locked on hers. "I am asking you to stay as much more than that if you will have me. I am asking if maybe you feel even half of what I feel when I look at you, because Felicity, I cannot imagine this house without you in it anymore. Cannot imagine making coffee in the morning without you there to share it. Cannot imagine lying down at night without wishing you were beside me instead of behind a closed door." He took a shaky breath. "I am asking if you might consider courting me properly, with the intention of someday maybe becoming my wife. If you want," he added again, as if she might need the reminder that the choice was hers. Felicity felt tears spill over, and she was smiling and crying at the same time, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, Ashton, I want that. I want all of that." The joy that broke across his face was like sunrise. He stood, pulling her to her feet, and then his hands were cupping her face and he was kissing her, soft and sweet and perfect. Felicity kissed him back, pouring into it all the fear and loneliness and hope she had carried for so long, and feeling it transform into something bright and new. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ashton rested his forehead against hers. "I do not care what anyone says you are," he murmured. "Witch or healer or just a woman with a gift. You are the bravest, kindest person I have ever met, and I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you know that." "I love you," Felicity whispered, saying it out loud for the first time, tasting the truth of it. "I think I have loved you since that first day when you told the sheriff you had not seen me." "I love you too," Ashton said, and kissed her again. And Felicity thought that maybe, finally, she had found the place where she belonged. But happiness in the Oklahoma Territory in 1883 was not a thing that came without challenges. A week later, Sheriff Prout arrived at the ranch, warrant in hand, with 6 armed men behind him. Felicity saw them coming and her blood turned to ice. Ashton was out checking the north fence line. She was alone in the house, and there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. This was it then. The end of her brief, beautiful dream. She thought about grabbing a horse and fleeing, but they would just chase her down again, and this time Ashton would face consequences for harboring her. No. Better to face this herself, to try to keep him out of it. She stepped onto the porch as the sheriff and his men rode into the yard. Prout looked at her with grim satisfaction. "Felicity Owens, you are under arrest for the practice of witchcraft and suspicion of devil worship. You will come with us peacefully, or we will take you by force." "There is no need for force," Felicity said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I will come. But Sheriff, please, Ashton Dalton did not know who I was. I lied to him, told him I was just a woman looking for work. Do not punish him for my deception." "Save your lies for the judge," Prout said coldly. He dismounted and started toward the porch, and Felicity was preparing herself for the feel of ropes when a voice like thunder cut across the yard. "Get off my land." Ashton sat astride his bay mare at the edge of the yard, and he had a rifle in his hands pointed at the sheriff. His face was set in an expression Felicity had never seen before. All the gentleness burned away to leave something hard and dangerous. "Dalton, do not be a fool," Prout said. "We have a warrant. She is under arrest." "I do not give a damn about your warrant," Ashton said flatly. "That woman saved your daughter's life, and this is how you repay her, by calling her a witch and dragging her off to hang. She used unnatural powers," Prout began. "She used a gift from God to heal a dying child." Ashton's voice cracked like a whip. "And if you cannot see the difference, then you are a worse fool than I thought. Now I will say it one more time. Get off my land." "You are interfering with the law," one of the other men said, his hand moving toward his gun. The rifle in Ashton's hands shifted smoothly to point at him instead. "And you are trespassing on private property. This ranch is legally mine, purchased and paid for. That woman is my employee and my guest. You want to take her, you will have to go through me, and I promise you I am a better shot than anyone in this group." The standoff stretched, tension thick enough to choke on. Felicity wanted to scream at Ashton to stand down, to not throw his life away for her, but she also knew him well enough by now to know that once he had decided something, he did not back down. Finally, the sheriff spoke, his voice tight. "You are making yourself an accomplice to her crimes, Dalton." "She has committed no crimes," Ashton said. Healing is not a crime. Being different is not a crime, and I will defend her right to live in peace on my land with my life if necessary. So you have a choice, Sheriff. You can ride away now and we can all pretend this never happened. Or you can start shooting, and a lot of people are going to die today, probably starting with you. Felicity could see the calculations running behind Pruitt's eyes. He was angry, but he was not stupid. A gunfight would be messy, would likely result in deaths on both sides, and would be very hard to justify to any judge when the warrant was for a woman whose only proven crime was healing his daughter. "This is not over," Pruitt finally said, but he was already backing toward his horse. "We will come back with more men." "You do that," Ashton said, "and I will have more time to get my lawyer involved. I am sure Judge Crawford will be very interested to hear about a sheriff who tried to arrest a woman for saving a child's life." The sheriff and his men rode out, and the moment they were out of sight, Ashton vaulted off his horse and ran to Felicity. She threw herself into his arms, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. "You should not have done that," she gasped against his chest. "You should have let them take me. Now you are in danger too. Do you really think I would just hand you over to them?" Ashton held her tight, his heart hammering against her ear. "Felicity, I meant what I said. I will defend you with everything I have." "But it is not right," she said desperately. "You have worked so hard for this place, for this life. I cannot let you lose it all because of me." Ashton pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands on her shoulders. "What good is any of it if I have to give up the person who makes it all matter? This ranch, this land, it is just dirt and wood without someone to share it with. I would give up every acre if it meant keeping you safe." "We have to leave," Felicity said, thinking fast. "Both of us. Go west or north, start somewhere new where no one knows us." "Or," Ashton said slowly, "we make our stand right here. We get married legally, which gives you more protection under the law. I write to every newspaper between here and Dallas, tell them the story of a sheriff who wants to punish a woman for healing his daughter. We make enough noise that it becomes politically impossible for them to come after you without looking like monsters." "That is insane," Felicity said. "Maybe," Ashton agreed. "But I am tired of running and hiding. You did nothing wrong. You saved a life. And I will not let anyone punish you for that without a fight." Looking into his eyes at the absolute conviction there, Felicity felt something shift inside her. She had spent her whole life hiding, shrinking herself down, trying to be invisible. What if instead she stood tall? What if instead of letting fear dictate her choices, she let love be her guide? "All right," she said quietly. "We do it your way. But Ashton, if it goes badly, if they come back with an army, I want you to promise me you will not die for this. Promise me you will walk away." "I promise I will do everything in my power to keep us both alive," Ashton said, which was not the promise she had asked for but was probably the best she would get. "Now come on. We have work to do." The next 2 days were a whirlwind. Ashton rode into Gainesville and found a lawyer willing to take their case, a young man named Benjamin Shaw, who was more interested in justice than in profit. He listened to their story with growing outrage and agreed to file papers with the territorial court, arguing that the warrant against Felicity was unlawful, based on religious superstition rather than actual crime. Ashton also visited the Gainesville newspaper and told the editor the entire story, leaving out no details. The editor, a crusty old veteran named Hugh Morris, had no love for sheriffs who abused their power and even less love for mobs. He published the story on the front page under the headline "Sheriff Prosecutes Woman Who Saved His Daughter." Within a week, the story had spread. Other newspapers picked it up. Letters began appearing in editorial sections, some condemning Felicity as a witch, but many more condemning the sheriff for his ingratitude and the mob for their violence. A preacher in Dallas gave a sermon about the sin of returning evil for good. A women's group in Texas wrote an open letter defending Felicity's right to use her gifts in service of others. The tide, slowly, began to turn. During this time, Felicity and Ashton were married in a small ceremony at the ranch, with Benjamin Shaw and his wife as witnesses. It was not the wedding Felicity had dreamed of as a girl. No white dress or church full of friends, but when Ashton took her hands and promised to love and protect her for all his days, she felt more married than any ceremony could have made her. That night, they consummated their union in the bed they would now share, and it was tender and awkward and perfect, two people learning each other's bodies and hearts at the same time. Afterward, Felicity lay in Ashton's arms and felt safer than she had in her entire life. "I never thought I could have this," she whispered into the darkness. "A husband, a home, a real life." "You deserve all of that and more," Ashton murmured against her hair, "and I intend to spend every day making sure you have it." 3 weeks after the standoff, Judge Crawford came to the ranch himself, having heard about the case and wanting to see the situation firsthand. He was an older man with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness. He interviewed both Felicity and Ashton separately, then together, asking detailed questions about her abilities and how she used them. Finally, he sat back and said, "Show me." Felicity hesitated, but Ashton squeezed her hand encouragingly. She fetched one of the barn cats, a mouser with a torn ear from a recent fight. Holding the cat gently, she placed her hand over the wound and let her gift flow. The judge watched intently as the torn flesh knit itself together in less than a minute, leaving only smooth fur behind. "Remarkable," Crawford said quietly. He looked at Felicity with something like wonder. "Young woman, do you understand what you have?" "A curse," Felicity said bitterly. "Something that makes people fear and hate me." "A gift," the judge corrected firmly. "One of the most valuable gifts I have ever witnessed. With training, with understanding, you could save countless lives, not just animals but people. Soldiers wounded in battle, children with fevers, mothers in difficult childbirth." He leaned forward. "Miss Owens, or I suppose it is Mrs. Dalton now, I am going to do something highly irregular. I am going to quash the warrant against you and issue an order stating that your healing abilities do not constitute witchcraft under territorial law. Further, I am going to recommend to the territorial governor that you be granted official status as a medical practitioner with all the protections and privileges that entails." Felicity could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You would do that, but the sheriff, the people who want me gone." "The sheriff will be instructed to leave you alone, or he will find himself facing charges of harassment," Crawford said crisply. "As for the people who want you gone, they are welcome to their opinions, but they are not welcome to pursue vigilante justice. This territory is governed by law, not mob rule, and it is past time everyone remembered that." The judge was true to his word. Within a month, Felicity had official papers declaring her a legal medical practitioner. The sheriff, faced with both legal pressure and significant public backlash, withdrew his complaint and even issued a grudging public apology. The mob that had chased her dispersed, their fury dampened by the weight of official sanction and public opinion. People still whispered, of course. Some still crossed themselves when she walked by, but others began to appear at the ranch quietly, asking for help. A farmer whose wife had a growth on her arm that no doctor could treat, a mother with a child whose broken leg had healed crooked, an old man with a cough that would not go away. Felicity helped them all, and word spread. The Witch of Ardmore became the healer of Ardmore, and over time even the most stubborn skeptics had to admit that whatever she did, it worked, and it helped people. Ashton stood beside her through all of it, her partner and protector and love. He expanded the ranch, bringing in more horses and building a second barn. Felicity created a small clinic in one of the outbuildings, a place where people could come to be treated in comfort and privacy. Their life found its rhythm. Work and healing and quiet evenings on the porch watching the sunset paint the Oklahoma sky in shades of orange and pink. Laughter over dinner and tender nights in each other's arms. The deep contentment of two people who had found their place in the world together. 2 years after Felicity first stumbled onto Ashton's land fleeing for her life, she realized she was pregnant. She told him one evening over supper, watching his face as the news sank in. For a moment he just stared at her, and then a grin spread across his face that was pure joy. "A baby," he breathed. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Felicity asked, though she could see the answer in every line of his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Ashton said, and he came around the table to pull her into his arms. "I love you so much, you and our child. I am the luckiest man in the territory." Their son was born in the spring of 1886, a healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him Thomas, after Ashton's father, and from the moment he entered the world he was loved beyond measure. Felicity had worried during her pregnancy that her gift might cause problems, might create a child who was different in ways that would make life hard for him. But Thomas was simply a normal, beautiful baby, and if he had any special abilities, they were not apparent in his early years. Life settled into a new pattern then, busier and louder and infinitely more exhausting, but also more fulfilling than Felicity had ever imagined possible. She reduced her healing work during Thomas's first year, seeing only emergencies, and Ashton took on more of the household tasks without complaint. They were partners in every sense, sharing the work and the joy and the sheer, overwhelming responsibility of raising a child. When Thomas was 2 years old, Felicity became pregnant again, and this time their daughter was born, Alice, with her father's smile and her mother's stubborn determination. The ranch house rang with the sounds of children playing and laughing, and Felicity would sometimes stop in the middle of cooking or cleaning or healing and just listen, marveling at the life she had built from the ashes of that terrifying day when she had run for her life. The children grew. Thomas showed an early aptitude for working with horses, just like his father. Alice developed a gift for growing things and could make plants flourish with just a touch, a subtle echo of her mother's healing abilities. Felicity taught her how to control it, how to use it without fear, giving her daughter the guidance she herself had never had. Ashton's ranch prospered. His reputation as a horse trainer spread, and people came from as far as Texas and Kansas to buy his animals. Felicity's healing practice continued, and she trained several young women from the area in more conventional medicine, helping to establish Ardmore as a place where sick and injured people could find real help. The town that had once wanted her dead became, if not exactly welcoming, at least accepting. She and Ashton were invited to church socials and town meetings. Their children played with other children. They were, in most ways that mattered, simply another family working to build a life in the Oklahoma Territory. Sometimes, late at night, Felicity would lie in bed next to Ashton and remember that day she had run through the dust with a mob at her heels. She would remember the terror, the certainty that her life was over, the desperation. And then she would look at the man sleeping beside her, at the house they had built together, at the life they shared, and she would marvel at how much could change in a handful of years. "What are you thinking about?" Ashton would sometimes murmur, sensing her wakefulness. "How lucky I am," Felicity would answer. "How much I love you, how grateful I am that you sheltered me when I had nowhere else to go." Magic or not, you were always welcome here, Ashton would say, echoing those unspoken words from that first day. You will always be welcome here. This is your home. I am your home. And Felicity would settle into his arms and let sleep take her, safe and loved and finally at peace. The years continued to pass, marked by the small and large events of any family's life. Thomas learned to break horses and developed his father's easy way with animals. Alice studied healing with her mother and eventually married a young doctor from Gainesville, bringing modern medical knowledge together with Felicity's gift in ways that saved countless lives. More grandchildren came, filling the ranch house with noise and chaos and love. Ashton's hair went gray, then white. Felicity developed laugh lines around her eyes and silver streaked through her dark hair. They moved a little slower, tired a little easier, but the core of what they had built together remained strong. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over land they had made their own through sweat and stubbornness and love, and their hands would find each other without thought, fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. When Ashton was 62, he took a fall from a horse and broke several ribs. Felicity healed the worst of it, but he was slower to recover than he had been in his youth. That was when they finally accepted that they were getting old, that the endless energy of their younger days was behind them. Thomas took over more of the ranch operations, and they eased into something that looked almost like retirement. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the town of Ardmore threw them a party. It was held in the church hall, the same church where people had once called for Felicity's death, and it was attended by nearly everyone in town. There were speeches and toasts, stories about the lives Felicity had saved and the horses Ashton had trained. Someone had even commissioned a small plaque that read, "To Ashton and Felicity Dalton, who showed us that courage and compassion can change the world." That night, walking home under a sky full of stars, Ashton pulled Felicity close and kissed her temple. "Not bad for a cowboy and a witch, huh?" Felicity laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. "Not bad at all, though I prefer healer to witch." "I prefer remarkable woman who I am deeply in love with," Ashton said, "but healer works too." They lived another 20 years after that, long enough to see their grandchildren grown and their great-grandchildren born. Long enough to see Ardmore grow from a dusty frontier town into a proper city with schools and hospitals and churches. Long enough to see attitudes toward healing and medicine shift, to see people with gifts like Felicity's slowly become accepted rather than feared. Ashton died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 84, lying in the bed he had shared with Felicity for more than 40 years. She held his hand as his breathing slowed and stopped, and though her heart broke with the loss, she was also grateful. Grateful for every moment they had shared, every sunrise they had watched together, every challenge they had faced side by side. She lived 2 years beyond him, long enough to finish writing down the story of her life so her grandchildren and great-grandchildren would know where they came from. Long enough to see Alice established as one of the most respected healers in the territory. Long enough to make peace with the life she had lived and the love she had known. On a warm spring morning in 1929, Felicity Dalton passed away surrounded by her family in the house that Ashton had built and she had made into a home. She was 86 years old, and she died with a smile on her face, her last words a whisper. "Magic or not, I was always welcome here." They buried her beside Ashton on a hill overlooking the ranch. 2 simple headstones marking the resting place of 2 extraordinary people who had faced down fear and prejudice, and hate with nothing more than courage and love. The town that had once wanted her dead mourned her passing, and the church that had called her a witch held a memorial service that overflowed with people wanting to pay their respects. In the years that followed, the story of the witch who came to Ardmore and the cowboy who sheltered her became something of a legend. People would tell it to their children and grandchildren, a reminder that sometimes the greatest magic is not in healing hands or mystical powers, but in the simple choice to see another person's humanity and offer them safety when they have nowhere else to turn. The Dalton Ranch continued for generations, run by Thomas and then his children and then theirs, each generation adding their own chapters to the family story. But in the house, hanging above the fireplace, there remained a small plaque that had been made after both Ashton and Felicity had passed. It bore their names and dates, and below that, a simple inscription that captured the essence of their remarkable love story. Here in this place, magic found welcome, fear found courage, and two hearts found home. May all who enter remember that love is the greatest gift of all. And in Ardmore, Oklahoma, for more than 100 years after that terrifying day when a woman ran for her life and a cowboy offered her shelter, people did remember. They remembered that the things that make us different can also make us beautiful. They remembered that standing up for what is right sometimes means standing alone. Most of all, they remembered that love, real, fierce, unconditional love, can transform not just individual lives, but entire communities. The town which had been chased to his land. The cowboy had sheltered her, saying magic or not, she was welcome there. And from that single act of defiance and compassion, a love story for the ages had been born, one that would echo through the generations as a testament to the power of choosing kindness over fear, acceptance over hatred, and love above all else.